Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started, I want to take a moment to talk to you guys about personal development. You see, if I've learned anything over the last 5 years of hosting this show, it's that the journey of self-improvement never ends. There's always a way to improve and grow. That's why my team and I have recently launched Superhuman Squad, an all-access pass to our full library of personal development courses. Think of it as the Netflix of personal development. For just $49 a month, you get access to each and every one of our premium courses, which sell for as much as $399 each. Best of all, you'll be the first to gain access to our new courses that we're developing in partnership with some of the most esteemed thought leaders we've ever hosted on the show. To get started, simply visit superhumanacademy.com. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode of the Superhuman Academy podcast. You guys, this week you are in for a special treat because you are actually going to meet one of my oldest and dearest friends, Yizhaky. Maya is a digital mindfulness and digital Zen expert, I guess I would call her, who helps people understand better ways to get in control of their technology, better ways to create peace and order in their lives, and better ways to get through all the digital chaos. She spent 6 years working in a consulting firm, working with some of the world's largest companies. She then worked with the UN and has since been very interested in working with private clients, helping them declutter their lives and their souls. In this episode, we go really deeply into all different kinds of strategies to get rid of all the different clutter in your digital lives. We talk about why digital clutter exists, why it matters, what the negative effects are in your life, and then we start to talk about practical ways that you can actually start to overcome all of this clutter, ways that'll actually last. It's a really wide-ranging, really interesting conversation. I enjoyed it, and so we actually went longer than I usually do because we just got so sucked in. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with my friend, Maya Yizhaky. Miss Maya Yizhaky, welcome to the show. It's so fun to have you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Lovely to be here.
Yes. So background story for those in the audience. Maya and I have been dear friends for over a decade. And so I'm really excited to get to know her from this angle, kind of approach with beginner's mindset and learn things that maybe I didn't even know in your history.
Yeah, after 10 years of friendship, it's always nice to see some new things about someone.
Right. So for those who are not yet filled in, tell me a bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to doing it.
Sure. So I started my career out as a strategy consultant, doing the normal coaching, leadership training, management consulting for very large organizations. And during my time at all of these big companies, I just kept seeing the same issues pop up in everyday life over and over and over again, both on the client side and also on our team side. And a lot of these issues were digital issues. Right. So people are not able to prioritize their time management. They're not able to get things done. They're overwhelmed by the amount of volume they have in their digital lives. And that just seeps into every other aspect of their life. So this was something that I personally was also experiencing and suffering from actually in my day-to-day life. I was getting 400 emails a day.
Wow.
That's a full-time job essentially.
Right.
So during my time in consulting, I started coming up with ways to kind of hack the system and see how can I devolume, how can I systematize my day-to-day work, and how can I help others on teams do that same thing.
Right.
And it just was like a natural kind of progression. I think that when you have a natural inclination for something, and when people around you have a clear need, sometimes you have that magic.
Right. So from strategy consultant, this is one of those episodes where I'm glad I have background knowledge. You actually went to work for an even bigger organization.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you saw some of the same problems at this huge organization. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so then I I moved from the business side of things to a little bit of a even more complex context. I started working for the United Nations.
Wow.
So when you're working for an institution like the UN, you also have other layers to the normal business problems that we all face.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to business problems and tech problems, you also have a really interesting political context.
Right.
Lots of adventures there, that's for sure.
So what's interesting to me is these are two organizations that are very big, very established, and especially, I don't know if you want to say which strategy consultant because of what I'm about to say, but especially at a company that's supposed to be helping people figure out their tech and their systems and their people processes. Essentially what you're saying is like, we're all suffering from this overwhelm.
Yeah, we're all human. I
Right.
think that's the biggest thing. That's the thing that I was kind of touched by at the United Nations at the end of the day. We're all humans and we're all dealing with so much technology that just kind of came about in our generation.
Right.
So before this time, we didn't have handheld devices,
Mm-hmm.
definitely not the expectation to be available at all times.
Right.
And, you know, we're all kind of swimming and trying to stay afloat
Yeah.
through the digital noise.
Wow. And I think that it's somewhat kind of like relieving to figure out that it's not our fault on some level. Like if people who are at the peak of their game at one of the most elite organizations or one of the most elite institutions in the world are suffering from this, like, how am I supposed to keep up at my day-to-day job? Or if I'm a student, if I'm still getting these skills, like, it's too much.
Definitely. It's digital overwhelm. And essentially, it's not our fault. We also have tech companies that are constantly producing
Right.
devices, applications, technologies that try to suck us in and try to capture our attention, essentially.
Right. So you left the UN. Tell me about your journey since then. And I know that you're probably one of the only people who matches me in personal development and doing the work, so to speak. So like, tell me a bit about that journey, because you had an incredible half decade. Yeah.
Yeah, I think after my time at the UN, I wanted a little bit of time off. I did some
Mhm.
traveling. You know, we both love to travel, and have been doing also some personal work in the worlds of yoga, meditation. You know, it's so millennial these days to talk about those things, but they're not millennial. They're ancient, and
Right.
they're full of wisdom for all of us.
Right.
Yeah, I spent a month at an ashram this year, and that has definitely shaped my perspective even more so about technology.
Yeah.
It was very much a detox month, and I do encourage my clients in general to take at least a detox day or a weekend to remember what it's like to not always have our attention captivated by devices.
Right. And so since leaving the UN, you've done a lot of work with clients digitally decluttering their lives. Tell me about the experience of that and like the things that you've learned. And
Yeah.
because in a moment we'll get to this whole method, which really blew my mind, because I consider myself to be a very organized person, but yet in working with you and in understanding like how much thought you've put into this, I want to know where that came from.
I think it comes from something bigger. I think that sometimes our work in the world is part of something bigger than our individual desires. And I've just always had this natural ability to feel people's problems.
Okay.
And, you know, I think that our outer worlds are a reflection of our inner worlds. And sometimes when we change our environments, we're able to then create a lot of change inside of ourselves. It's kind of like this mutual process. Like something changes inside in your thoughts or your feelings, and then you can change the outside, and then something changes outside and it changes the inside.
Kind of like a back and forth.
Yeah, very much a back and forth. And when I think about anything to do with minimalism and decluttering, I think of release. I think of creating space for new movement and new parts of your life to flourish. And I think that's why that work is gratifying for me.
Right.
I love working with clients who are overwhelmed maybe in every area of their life. And you start with something quite tactical and quite tangible, like your emails. Right. And then once someone is able to kind of master that area, you see the energy that they get to then master other areas of their lives.
That's interesting. Is there maybe a specific story that stands out to you that kind of illustrates that? I don't know if that's confidential.
I actually think I'm a great story for that.
Yeah, tell me.
I think that I used to spend a lot of time just, taking care of my house, taking care of my what I wear every day, just kind of shuffling through the monotony of bureaucracy and all of these things. And in the last 3 to 4 years, I've hacked a lot of those things.
Right.
I have quite a simple wardrobe compared to most people I know. I sticked with a few colors that I like. I simplified whatever I could, and that creates more time. So when people often ask me, like, how do you have time to go to India for a month?
Right.
How do you have time to do all of these things? And I know people ask the same thing of you. And I made the time.
Right.
I made the time, and I love to help other people make the time to
Right.
do the important things, the work that has to do with their soul essentially, and their family and friends. And
that's a great segue, actually, because I think a lot of people, and my wife, and that she's this way, a lot of people think, like, why does it matter, right? It doesn't bother me, so to speak. Or many people think, well, my house is organized, so what? Like, I don't see my email. Why does it matter? And I know you have very strong opinions on it. So,
well, I think it matters because society has made it matter. Basically, no matter what profession you're in, if you're a neurosurgeon and you are doing incredible work, saving lives, whatever you're doing, you essentially have to interact with technology throughout the day to get your job done. If you're a modern person in the modern world, and because we have so many touch points to technology, if we're not taking the time to pause and to redesign how we're using that technology and to be intentional about it, we can be subsumed by it, and that affects the quality of our work.
I like that.
So let's just talk through that doctor example, because I think we all see that all the time. I walk in to see my doctor. He has to open the computer, pull up my case file, browse things really quickly.
Right.
He has his phone off to the side. I see it on his desk. I see notifications blaring.
Right.
I see his WhatsApp on blast. And I see that he's digitally distracted.
Right.
And if he's doing that, is he able to really show up for me as his patient? Is he able
Right.
to notice my subtle cues, my body language, my pain? Is he able to see all of those things beyond?
Let alone, like, if he's that out of control in his personal device, chances are he's not keeping records very well.
Right.
And he's not using the system the way it's designed, and he's likely, I mean, there's the instance of medical malpractice and just simple human error. Like, I don't remember the statistic at this point, but I was reading a book that was talking about, like, the huge numbers of people who die in hospitals, and the vast majority of the time it's human error. It's not lack of skill. It's not lack of technology. It's literally instances, and there's a famous case where someone, instead of 150 milligrams of morphine, gave someone 1,500 milligrams because they were distracted, right? And they just typed 1,500. Yeah. And then someone just did it.
And part of technology's role is actually to capture those and prevent those kind of mistakes.
Right.
That is the benefit, as we know.
Right.
Neither of us are against technology use.
Totally.
And there's so many benefits to systems and to IT systems managing parts of our lives.
Right.
But that's a process. It's not happening overnight.
Yes. And I'm right now listening on Audible to Charles Duhigg's latest book. I love Charles Duhigg. And Smarter, Better, Faster. And he talks about, there's this phenomenon. He uses this example of a flight, an Air France flight that went down despite all the automation. And what they figured out is that the human brain has this difficulty transitioning from it's automated, let the machine handle it, to, okay, I need to take over. And there's like some cognitive flaw that we have where it's like, in the minute we take over. And so what happened was, this pilot, everything was on autopilot, everything was all good. The instruments got clogged, and the people had to take over. And the minute that they took over, they did something completely irrational because they weren't able to make that switch, and they pulled up when they should have gone down, and the plane stalled and crashed. So it's like, it's super interesting because the takeaway that he draws is that in an era, many people think like, oh, automation, and I don't need to worry about all these different things because, my washing machine is automated now to know not to burn my clothes. But it's actually more important than ever to pay attention, because in that critical moment where you take over, and you do have to take over many times, like, any kind of computer system, there's a huge margin for error.
Yes.
It's insane. It's super interesting. So talk to me a little bit about, although
I'd like to mention one thing.
Yeah, let's touch more on the why it matters.
So I actually, if just thinking about the doctor example, there's one thing that also really comes across to me, which is that doctor is also not the master of his own time.
Right.
So if he's, distracted during our time at his job,
right.
I mean, when it comes to his personal life, his personal goals, ambitions, his relationships, how present is he for those?
Right.
And so I think that that's something that I also work with all of my clients and with anyone who's listening. Technology affects every part of our life. It is digital distraction is everywhere, and unless you're the one taking control and choosing how and when to use your technology, you're going to get swallowed up, essentially.
That's interesting. One of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes is, he talks about this story where you saw the energy usage per mile traveled of every animal, and humans were like way far back, and then the falcon was really, really high, soaring. But then you put a human on a bicycle, and the human just soars way past every other animal, right? And so the analogy he loved to use over and over and over is, the computer is the bicycle for the mind. And when you were speaking, I was just thinking, like, if your technology is disorganized, you have this incredible tool, the computer, the phone, even more incredible, right? And if you're not using it properly, your bicycle has flat tires, right? Or worse, or like a rusty chain. And the other thing is, let's think about it, right? So many people think, as long as my house is, or my car is clean, like, what does it matter if my email's overflowing? But let's be completely honest. Like, what do you spend more time in, your living room or your computer? I don't know about you guys, and this isn't something I'm proud of, but it's my line of work. I run a remote company. I spend like 7 to 8 hours a day on my various devices, like working, writing. So if my Google Drive is decluttered, it probably has a bigger impact than if my kitchen is decluttered.
Wow.
Or cluttered, rather.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Think about that.
I mean, most people are spending 2 to 4 hours a day on their handheld devices.
Right.
So that's like putting aside, your people who are using their computer for work, like you do, or I do. And that's 2 to 4 hours a day.
Right. That's way more time than I spend in my kitchen,
right,
my car. That's probably, if I'm honest, more time than I spend in my living room.
Yeah. And, if we just think about that 2 to 4 hours also being saturated with clutter,
right,
then what is the quality of those 2 to 4 hours?
Right. Not to mention like the happiness side, right?
Yeah.
So McKinsey's done research, this. People are 5 times more effective in flow. If you're getting a notification every 15 minutes, you're never getting into flow.
Yeah.
And just that, like, our digital interactions. I mean, you taught me this. I'll let you say it. You have this amazing quote in the course, like, our digital interactions are fundamentally not making us happier.
Yeah, I think one thing I often have people look at is how they feel before they perform any digital function and after. Okay, so we have a lot of digital functions that we use for our work lives. So I don't expect people to be happier after they check their work emails. Okay, that's
really?
for sure. Not shocking, but yeah. But a lot of us are, using social media or reading things online or whatever other function we use on our phones. And I ask people to look at how they feel before and after that use. And actually the Center for Humane Technology Design has a really interesting list of app happiness, basically,
really?
of how people feel before and after they use apps, and which ones make people happier. So,
oh my gosh,
as you would expect,
we will put a link to this in the show notes. We'll find it.
Yeah. So as you would expect, when people are using a meditation app, for example, they tend to feel happier, calmer, more at peace. But if they're using a dating app, they oftentimes will not be feeling so satisfied. So basically for your listeners, what I would recommend is just, for the next day or two, take a look at how you feel how
Yeah.
you feel before and after you use
I love that.
any digital function.
I love that. Now, I want to ask you, what are some best practices? Because you've worked with a lot of clients and you've come up with some kind of key fundamentals, rules to kind of live by in your digital life that I think are really valuable for people.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I think that one that speaks to a lot of people, and I know it spoke to you, is this idea of one home.
Right.
So that for every different digital activity that you have consolidated where that activity takes place in one area. So let's make that a little bit more concrete.
Sure.
So for example, if you are anyone, you basically have hundreds of passwords probably for every login feature that you use. And if your passwords are scattered all over the place, you're going to be wasting time every single day looking for passwords, resetting them, that whole cycle. So having one place for your passwords. And I know it sounds really, really simple, but the majority of people have not done that yet.
Right.
Yeah. So just looking through everything that you use every day essentially should be in one place.
Or worse, they have one password, right?
Yeah.
Which is like so unsecure, so unsafe. Like, not to mention, if you can remember your password easily, chances are it's pretty easy for a computer to crack.
Definitely. And the easiest, this is the value of technology. You don't need to memorize 100 passwords. Your brain can do value add activities.
Right.
And we have technology for that.
Right.
So let's take advantage of that.
Yeah. The one home thing is life changing, and it's also changed the way I live in my home, literal physical home. A few months ago, Joe Polish called me and was like, "You're like the tech organization guy," because I told him we're building this course. He's like, "I have notes," because he goes to so many masterminds. He's like, "I have notes from Genius Network on these notebooks. I have them in my iPad. I have them on this special device I bought. I have them on pieces of paper. I have them on an Everlast notebook. Like, what do I do?" And I was like, "One home." And there are softwares that can become that one home. Even if right now I'm taking notes on this notebook, this is going to go up into the cloud in my one home. And it's life-changing because I always know where to find things.
Yeah, so let's talk through so that your listeners know for a second. Notes is an amazing example because our brain basically works with notes. We're constantly jotting things down, be it on a notebook or on the phone or in our phones. So I'd be curious to hear from you, for example. You're choosing to write down physical notes, right? Where will you then upload them to? Let's talk through your own notes.
So this is a nice segue to your second rule, but I won't give a spoiler yet. This is going to go into Evernote because I can put handwritten stuff and it'll get scanned in optical character recognition, and I can search everything and it takes every format. So even if I have video notes, picture notes, audio notes, it can all go in there. That's like my home for any kind of note that is not formatted text, because if it were formatted text, it would go in Google Drive.
Awesome. So yeah, the idea here is to designate one home for each function, and for you, all of your notes are going onto Evernote.
Right.
And what's important there is that you've downloaded the Evernote app onto every device, so that everything is synced, and you're able to.
Which is rule number 2. Best practice number 2. Tell me about that.
Best practice number 2 is that you have everything be cloud-based.
Right.
And
so there is one home, and the home is pretty much always the cloud. Now, tell me why that's important, because I know people might be skeptical of cloud computing. They might not get it.
Yeah, it is. When we first started using it, I think it was a really scary idea, right? Like, oh, our tech companies now have everything we own up in some mysterious cloud. What is that cloud?
Right.
What does that look like? And I think that now it's basically best practice. With the cloud, you have very high security level. You have easy accessibility, easy modification, and great interfaces now. So that's those are some things that have really improved in the last 5 or 10 years.
Well, and for me, it's like we used to, in my last business, we used to have this problem where we had different sources of data, because this was pre-cloud computing. Google Drive was just starting out. And so we'd have like the local copy of the database on the computer, and then we had to make sure that it matched the one on the website, and then it had to also match the one on Google Drive, which was a backup. And so like one of the rules that I developed because I geek out on processes and automation, that anytime you have two different databases of the same information, you're just asking for trouble because they'll
Yes.
never fully be synchronized. And like, it's okay to have one thing feed another thing. Like if there's, you need customer names here and you need customer names there, but they're different databases. Like you can use tools like Zapier to feed them. But I guess the conclusion that I came to, and I didn't fully form it until I met you, is you can't really have one home if that home is not an off-site, centrally located thing that everything else feeds off of.
Yes, exactly.
It's not possible. Like unless you're gonna, if you want your one home to be your computer, then your computer needs to be on at all times, and it needs to be synchronizing, like always connected
And
to the
you need
web.
to be connected to it, essentially.
Yeah, and you need to do like, you remember when like remote computing was a thing?
Yes.
Like you could install basically like a Trojan horse on your own computer, but it was private, and that would allow you to access your own computer while you were traveling, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you do that when Google and all these other companies like Evernote have 24-hour dedicated, server farms?
Right. Well, some very secure companies that need to care about their or organizations that need to care about their information and make sure that everything really is encrypted, and companies that operate at the highest levels of security still use that.
They do that, but I would argue that just means that they created their own private cloud.
Yeah, that's
like,
what they do
basically
essentially.
what they've done.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is so interesting because this cloud thing, it will change your life, right? And Charles Bird, who I had on the podcast, and he did a webinar to my audience, which was phenomenal, like tells all these stories of customers of his who like, car breaks down. The car just got cleaned, so you don't have the insurance. Like, do you have your car insurance scanned somewhere? My sister-in-law came over yesterday and lost her credit card. She said, on the way here, I don't know what happened. I lost my credit card. Now me, I've got all that stuff securely encrypted in a what I call a digital safe. So like, no big deal. I can still use it until I find the actual card or cancel it or whatever. And I can't tell you how many times I have another habit that I guess I would add to this, which is anytime someone gives you information, save that information, right? Like if you need your mother-in-law's passport because one time you book a flight for the whole family, you're probably going to need it again.
You're really good about that.
I'm so good about it.
I see that also in our friendship. You're amazing at that.
Right. Like I have your address and your contact thing.
You have all my information.
All of it. If someone asks me to pay them by Bitcoin, I put that into their contact on the thing. If they give me their bank account information, I save that because you can't. I mean, it's pretty secure. Credit cards, I don't do that, obviously. We have a secure system that we save people's credit cards. But I'm really, really fanatical about it because, first off, how crappy is it when a friend of 10 years goes, hey, remind me your address? Like, come on, dude. You know?
Or you don't remember their birthday or anything like that.
Yeah, and I have all kinds of stuff like door codes for my friend's building so I don't have to call them when I'm downstairs. It's, and I'm the memory expert, so I could memorize these things, but it's kind of unnecessary if you're meticulous. So I would say like those three are really phenomenal best practices for people.
Yeah, those are amazing. And I think what I'd like to mention here is that those really work well for you. And what's important in anything with our digital lives is that each person does take the time to figure out what works for them.
Totally.
All right, super friends, I just want to take a quick break here really quickly to talk about the single most important improvement and hack that you can make to feel superhuman, a hack that almost every single guest mentions on the show. Do you know what it is? It's sleep. We need to be getting really, really good, high-quality sleep, or we run the risk of depression, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and many, many more things. But one of the biggest problems around getting good sleep is temperature. It is really tough to get good sleep if you're too hot or too cold. And that's why I want to tell you about the Pod by 8 Sleep. It's a high-tech bed designed specifically to help you achieve optimal sleep fitness, and it was developed by leading sleep researchers after tracking 43 million hours of sleep. So it combines dynamic temperature regulation and sleep tracking to enhance your rest and recovery. It learns your sleep habits and adjusts the temperatures automatically for both you and your mate. It is a crazy comfortable bed that helps you sleep longer and deeper so you wake up refreshed and ready to take on the world as a superhuman. Now, you can try the pod for 100 nights, and if you don't absolutely love it, they'll actually refund your purchase and arrange a free pickup. So, for a limited time, you can get $150 off your purchase when you go to 8sleep.com/super. That's EIGHT sleep.com/super. duhigg.com/super. All right, let's get back to the show.
One of the things that we have that we offer in our new online courses on this subject is that there are different intuitive organizational types.
Right.
So different people have a different natural tendency and a different preference for how organized they want to be and how
Right.
organized they can be.
Right.
So I think for
Can is a big.
can is big, and so I think for you it's incredible that how natural it is for you to process and retain this kind of information.
Right.
But for some people it's just not going to be realistic, and that's okay.
Totally. And I think you're so spot on, because I remember many years ago, I went to a psychiatrist to talk about my ADD and stuff like that. And he was still trying to figure out like to what extent I have it. And he goes, "Are you very organized?" And I said, "Yeah." Like, to what extent? Like, are you organizing things in your drawer by color, that kind of level? And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's very common among people who have ADD, because
Yes.
you have to solve the internal clutter with external declutter. Like, it's so easy for me to get distracted. This happens all the time. Like, I can open up be working on something on Google Drive and then determine I'm going to save it somewhere. And if that folder is decluttered or cluttered, I keep switching the terms. If that folder is cluttered and there's a file there that shouldn't be, I can't not. So it's like everything needs to be lined up and smooth. And just yesterday, interestingly enough, I'm working on another course right now, a certified coaching program. And it's just been me dragging my feet because everything's been, I haven't yet determined the order I want everything to fall into place. So what did I do? Knowing this about myself and knowing, after working with you for months on this course, that if I create some external order, it's going to create more internal order. So I got my assistant to come in and I was like, "Hey, I'm stuck in the mud here. Can you help me create some organization and help me figure out what needs to go where? And then can you just organize it for me in Google Drive and Asana and all the different places where it shows up?" So I went off and I wrote one lecture for half an hour while she organized. She came back and I just wrote the rest of the course, because by creating this order, I now had the ability to actually sit down and focus and get into my flow state. And I'm telling you guys, this was like 2 months I've been putting this thing off. Yeah. And all it took was just having my assistant like create some order, so I felt in control.
And stepping away also.
Yeah.
Stepping away from the screen for a little bit,
Right.
Working on something that boosted your creativity,
Totally.
that made you feel accomplished,
Totally.
and then coming back re-energized.
Totally.
That's
totally.
Really something that we recommend.
Yeah. Now you talked about these intuitive organizational types. This is something that you developed, and I've been impressed by how much it fits me and fits my wife and fits you. So tell me more about these.
Yeah, the intuitive organizational types really emerged through the actual client work I was doing.
Right.
Because I noticed that it was not one size fits all when it comes to organization. So, I think it's a little bit inspired by Marie Kondo's general principles. So she has a 6-step methodology for tidying. Bless her.
Yeah, she's amazing. And I know you've been like very inspired by her.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of Gretchen Rubin, who does some amazing stuff like classifying people. Like, are you a satisficer? Are you a maximizer? And it's like, for someone who doesn't, to my knowledge, have a PhD in psychology, it's like, God, that's spot on. So yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar actually with Gretchen's types. I need to look at that.
Oh, she's great.
I'm learning something on the
She's great.
Superhuman podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that I noticed that when working with clients that we had to tailor according to what people actually wanted and what was working for them. So when I started noticing that with my more creative inclined clients, people who work in the arts or are working in the wellness world, things like that, that they cared less about having everything perfectly filed and organized, and they needed like their core functions taken care of.
Right.
Like where they consolidate all of their documents and photos and things like that. And so over time, I started asking more and more questions to my clients, and I realized that the way we could differentiate a person's type was really based on these 2 factors. A natural inclination for organization, something that I think you have. Yeah. And I
necessity.
Have. Yeah, but by necessity often. I have a similar thing, by the way, to you. I need that quiet around me so that my inside can feel quiet.
Totally.
And it's all about knowing these parts of ourselves, you know? And then the other thing is our actual preference. So let's say, when I was a strategy consultant, I needed to have everything hyper organized so like I could not drop the ball at work, essentially.
Right.
And that can change over a lifetime.
Right.
And I want to say that both of those things actually can change over a lifetime. So
that's interesting. So it's essentially like a matrix, this 4 quadrants thing. And then tell me a bit about those 4 types.
Yeah, so we have on the upper right quadrant, we have the executor type.
Okay.
Which I believe you fall into. It's someone
Sounds
who
like
has
me.
a natural, the CEO type, as we call it. Someone who has a very high natural inclination for being organized and wants to be organized. Like really cares about it.
Yeah.
Someone who's willing to put the time in, wants to develop systems, wants things to be super.
Yeah, you sold. That's me.
Yeah, that's you.
Right.
And then if we move over to the left, upper left, we have the competent type.
Okay.
So that's someone who's naturally very organized, but actually doesn't care so much about it.
Interesting.
I find these people tend to be hyper efficient, maybe a little bit more so than you and I even.
Right.
Because they're people who just, they don't sweat it. They don't sweat the small stuff.
And they don't waste an hour coming up with a new automation to change their screen positioning like I did a month ago.
They're really impressive, and they're actually more rare, I think, to find. But at this point, when I talk to someone, I'm talking about this stuff all the time, but when I talk to someone, I can almost within 5 seconds identify that they're competent, because the first thing they'll say is like, why does someone need help with that?
Yeah.
Because they don't need help with
natural.
it. They're natural, and for them it's like so obvious.
Wow.
So
I wish.
Yeah, so those are the on the more organized side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have the 2 types that are a little less traditionally organized.
Okay.
So we have the striver type and the indifferent type.
Okay.
So basically, if we go to the bottom left, we have someone who is indifferent. They are not naturally organized, and they don't really care to be.
Yep. I married one of those.
So that's real. That can be a real challenge when you have 2 people that are in super different quadrants.
Right.
And you can both learn from each other too, which I'm sure you see.
I'd rather she learn from me, if I'm honest. But
I think what's amazing about it is you see that people can function and even thrive without being hyper organized.
Yeah, this blew my mind when I moved in with our mutual friend Lev. Actually, I don't think you know Lev too well, but he's super high functioning, super successful, super disorganized, and it blows my mind. Like, I would never be able to function with his setup.
Yeah, I always find it kind of amazing. I was always jealous,
right,
to be honest. So when I was a consultant, I had people like that on my team, and I think they were it was just kind of amazing. And yet they still have tools and techniques and tips that they can learn.
I was gonna say, just because you can doesn't mean that you wouldn't function better if you were more organized.
Exactly.
I think all of us would function better with a higher degree of organization. Would you agree?
In most areas of our life.
Right.
In most areas of our life.
Like, there's no one who's gonna be less efficient if their closet isn't perfectly organized so that they can see and find their clothes. Like, there's no one who can find something faster in a pile.
Right. But one of the things we look at is like, what's sustainable long run, right?
Exactly. And there's no way my wife is gonna color code and fold all her clothes, and it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah. And it's about being realistic about what
I love that.
What works for you, what works for the people in your life. So if you're one type and your boss is a competent or executor, let's say you're an indifferent or striver, which means that you're not so into the world of organization, basically. Right. And you have a boss who's hyper organized naturally or has trained themselves to be. That's gonna be tough.
Yeah, you're not gonna stick around too long if you're adding clutter to his or her world.
Yeah, and so that's why in our course we talk about these basic tips and techniques that everyone can do to just have a baseline level of organization.
Yeah. Now, before we move on to some more tips, Tell me about the fourth type.
The fourth type. The fourth type is really interesting because
Right.
I feel like a lot of my clients are the fourth type.
Right.
They're the strivers. So they basically are not so naturally organized, but want to be.
Yeah.
So they're the people who are always trying different email systems, for example. So
And
they've
it
tried
never
Get Things
works.
Done.
Yep.
They've tried Inbox
Yep.
Zero.
Yep.
They've tried everything under the sun, and nothing sticks.
Right.
And I would argue that that's because they sometimes reach too far, and that they really need to be realistic and compassionate to themselves.
I love that. All knowledge comes from knowledge of self, right?
Yes.
Talk to me about email.
Email.
This
Dun,
is
dun,
like the big
dun.
thing, and you mentioned email. What's the deal? Like, why do people struggle with this so much? I mean, for me, anytime I, look at someone's computer and I see that little bubble and it says 24,132, I'm like, how did you get here? To me, it's like, and I don't want to cast judgment on anyone for email or for what I'm about to say, but it's also like when you look at someone who's 22 years old and they have $50,000 in credit card debt, and you're like, how? Like, what did you buy? You haven't been on this planet that long. How do you have so much debt? That's how I feel about it. So maybe there is a little bit of judgment there, but why do people fail with this? What's so hard about it?
I think that they failed because there was never an instruction manual of any kind. And more so, our parents never gave us even a little bit of an instruction manual.
Right.
So most things in life we learn from our parents or from our schools, our education.
Yep.
And when it came to email, we definitely didn't learn from either of those.
Yep.
Our parents, most people's parents, if you're basically a millennial-ish, your parents don't know more about email than you do.
And, one realization that I had in creating this course with you, which it like blew my mind. Every piece of software you download or install, you don't download software anymore. Every piece of software you log into, because everything is software as a service, tells you there's a beautiful FAQ and everything on every little feature. If you want to add someone to this conversation, you do this. If you want to highlight the conversation, you do this. If you want to delete, modify, backup, every feature is covered. And I looked around, almost none of them have here's the best way to use this. Here's how we designed this. Here's how we intended for you to actually get the most out of the software, which is why folks like Charles Bird have built massive businesses around hey, I'm going to give you the actual, best practices guide and teach you how to use this software the way it was designed to be used. It's and it blew my mind. Why doesn't Gmail just have that?
I don't know. They should talk to me. We should do something.
Seriously, reach out to us, Sergey. Reach out to us, and but everything, we have this in my company. I have training manuals. How do we use Asana? Really simple, because if you use it wrong, it is going to be a nightmare for you.
Definitely.
And email, everyone uses email, and yet the same thing exists.
Definitely. I was thinking about that this morning. I got an email, of course, from Google about their new feature that they're doing they're splitting up basically Google Photos and Google Drive.
Right.
Because they used to have auto sync of the photos across both.
Okay.
And so they've changed it. They've separated it. It looks like they've separated out the functions. And the email had nothing to do with how you could use the new feature.
Right.
So any person, any layman off the street who's reading that email got this very technical email from Google this morning explaining that there's some new function with Google Photos.
Wow.
Honestly, it would create panic in me if I wasn't in the space.
Right.
Because it basically makes me think, are my photos disappearing? What's going to happen with them? Where are they going?
Yeah.
So yeah, email is basically the land of unknown management, as it is right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think it's one of those things that, and you brought this to my attention, you can't control the flow. If my notes app gets disorganized, I just take a pause and I stop putting new stuff in.
Right.
Whereas with email, one metaphor that I like and I use in one of my webinars is you can't dig yourself out of the ditch if there's 1,000 people standing on top of the ditch throwing more dirt in. Oof. And that's exactly how email is. It's you're sitting there on a Saturday afternoon trying to get rid of these emails. And the funny thing about email is the more you send, the more you get.
Yes.
So as you discover these old emails and you're trying to kind of follow up, hey, I never followed up, 5 emails are going to come back because of that. how can people start? I know we spend so much time in the course teaching this, but how can people start to get control over their email?
So I think a few things you just mentioned right up front. It's like you actually can turn down some of the volume of your email.
Yeah.
By looking at how you use email. So basically, you can use up front. You can basically unsubscribe, or you can basically unsubscribe and turn down the volume on as many newsletters and sales and promos and advertisements as many of us are getting.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So yeah,
especially if you're on our email list. I'm just kidding. kidding. We send super valuable emails.
Yeah, so I do think that's actually a really interesting point. Is anyone who is out there sending emails regularly, look at the quality and the content of what you're sending out.
Right.
That's about better email culture overall. That's about like
Yes.
our society and how we use email.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I try to do that. I'm quite mindful about what I send out these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage anyone who has a huge email list to just take a look at what you're sending out.
And stop sending the email that says, okay. I hate that email. Like, okay. You know, I now have started, and this is maybe part of a broader discussion around this culture. Like you say, like I've started when I intro to people, you know, you always get, that's a minimum 2 emails back, because each person is going to email and CC you, so you know that they did something with the intro. So I've started saying, this is literally my ending. Hope it's a really fruitful intro. No need to CC me.
Oh, great.
This has cut down because I do a lot of intros. I'm like a hyper connector, and I like to think I know a lot of cool people. I do a lot of intros and a lot of connections, and this has cut down my emails by about 30 a week.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
So something that I think that's a great example of how you actually do have control over your email life.
Yeah.
You know, you can take a look for the next week at all of the different emails that are coming in,
right,
and really see basically just what type of emails are coming in, which ones you no longer need in your life, which ones are just legacy from old email accounts, from old habits, from old subscription services, and turn down the volume.
Yeah.
So that's one area.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I tell people with email is, you know, you can basically use archive. This is amazing,
huge
feature. In which you don't have to delete your 24,000. I forgot the number you said.
24,132.
Oh, perfect.
I'm looking at you, Eunice from Genius Network. I remember.
So Eunice and our other friends who have not yet discovered archive will very much enjoy knowing that they can basically select all and archive all of their past emails.
Right.
This will give you a clean slate feeling.
Yeah.
And it means that you are still going to be able to search any email from the past and find it if you need to.
And research has shown, as you taught me, that actually IBM did a study. Yep. And it's actually faster to find emails through search than even if you have the most organized folders.
Yes.
Which blew my mind, because I keep folders, and sometimes you have to, like, you know, I'll do a folder for a specific trip that I'm going on. So I have my hotel in the right place, and I have my rental car in the right place, But, you know, for all those emails of like, let me put all my receipts into one folder, like, no, just, you can literally search for the product name, you'll find it faster.
Yeah, that's because Google search operators have become so advanced.
Right.
So once you really understand that you're able to find any email with basically the touch of a button, a few words, and you're kind of free from holding on to and seeing the amount of, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 emails.
Yeah,
totally. Those can be archived.
Yeah, and then your inbox. Well, so then what is the role of the inbox? I need to try not to answer the questions for you after learning from you for 3 months.
Yeah, no, I think the role of the inbox is what you want it to be, but essentially email is supposed to be a communication tool. Right. Right? It's supposed to be, it's not your to-do list. Right. It's not it really should be a means of communication. Right. For information that you want to receive and your information you want to send out to someone. So the inbox, therefore, is just things that you have not yet finished the communication on. Yes, exactly. Love that. And that it's so life-changing. How many emails are in your inbox right now? Right now, I have a very high number for me. I have 54. Wow. I know. And it's because I got injured, actually, for the last month, unfortunately. And I was kind of told by the doctors to really lay off computer life. And
Wow. 54 is like, I've never seen you above 8.
I know.
I think I'm at like 75 right now,
Yeah.
which is a lot for me, but I get a free pass because I only do email twice a week, and tomorrow is my email day. But
yeah, 54 is high. And so I think it's a great point of like, what happens when even, you have your system, you're super organized, you know what you're doing, you give yourself the time to normally do it, and you still fall behind because life happens.
Because we're human.
And so I have fallen behind. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to set aside more time next week to handle my emails, basically.
Yeah, and health comes first, obviously.
Definitely.
But I love that your worst case when you, and for those who don't know, Maya was like injured. I mean, you didn't leave the house. Like it was you were in I'm really glad you're in a much better state now. But if 54 is as bad as it gets, that's impressive.
I think it's the worst it's gotten in a few years.
And to be fair, I think 30 of those are from me about this project and this course that we're launching next week.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, so my bad on that. I think the next major thing is notifications, social media. I don't want to go too deep on this because we talked about it a little bit in why this matters and why this is such a big thing. You are one of the most, I don't want to say disciplined, but you have really, really good boundaries around social media, around use. And I know that it's not a discipline thing. It's an intentional habit which comes from your training in yoga and meditation. And talk to me about that.
Thank you. I think that for me, that stems from self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized I'm one of those people that's too sensitive for social media.
Yeah.
I'm just generally kind of a sensitive person, and that influx of other people's information.
Sensitive as in ups and downs emotionally, or sensitive as in it's sensory overload?
Sensory overload.
Sensory sensitive.
Yes.
Okay.
So
I was going to say, you're like one of the toughest women I know.
It's sensory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about also this idea of control, like we were talking about earlier. Controlling, there is an element of me controlling my emotions.
Yeah.
So, the normal thing of you go on Instagram, most people don't feel better after going on Instagram.
Right.
They end up comparing themselves to
Right.
other people. They end up basically in feelings of shame or
and by the way, comparing themselves to idealized fictional versions of other people.
Yes, exactly. So it's like this question of what are real spaces of connection in the digital world. And I would come back to you and say, I think you do a great job at authentically expressing yourself on social media.
I try to, and even when that means expressing things that people don't want to express, such as, I don't go on here, or my LinkedIn literally says Jonathan Levy is da-da-da-da. He does not use LinkedIn. Because I think you can't set boundaries without like kind of authentically communicating.
You need to know what your boundaries are first.
Totally.
And my relationship with social media is after a lot of different trial and error, and it will change. It continues to change.
Right.
As part of this course, I want to be reaching more people, and I want to be talking to them about this message.
It's a total trade-off. And I've also realized this is something, I don't have proof of this because no one will know how Facebook's algorithm works, but I've taken a real step back in the last year. I'm not posting on our company page as much. We're not advertising on Facebook as much. I'm not engaging on my personal page, which is connected. The other day I did a Facebook Live, which we announced a week in advance. We sent people the link, everything. 3 people showed up.
Really?
And I think what has happened, I mean, we know people who have talked about this publicly, who work at Facebook, we know that there's a relevance score. And I think I'm literally being penalized for not logging in and being active on Facebook, which blows my mind. And like I don't have notifications, so our company chat is connected to a different system that it exports the chat. But if someone messages me on my like brand profile page, Jonathan Levy, I don't answer. So I'm literally getting penalized, and Facebook is sending me notifications like turn on notifications to get better, blah blah blah. So it's like, number one, their desperation is insane, right? But number two, I'm literally having to make that choice, and this is a financial choice for me. Like if no one sees our posts on Facebook, that has like a pretty direct correlation to how well we sell and how well we can market new products. And you know what? I'm not going to budge. Like, I'm either going to hire someone who's deeply passionate about social media and that's their unique ability and they're going to do it for me, or I'm just going to take it on the chin because I'm not going to spend more than 15 minutes a day on all social media. That includes YouTube. And usually most days, today I already burnt my 15 minutes of social media watching. I love this channel. I'm not associated with this person. Polymatter.
What's that?
He takes these things that it's just like you and me, like curiosity, like what's Amazon's secret business model? And then he goes into like, they do this and then they do this and they do that. Or like why China's building a 70 million person city. Why Apple is so serious about privacy. Like he goes into these things and explains like statistics, and it's kind of like an infographic turned into a video.
Oh, cool.
So today I was watching like how to save the online economy. Like how do we get rid of ads and make the internet a fun place for us to consume content? So I usually burn my 15 minutes on that.
So do you consider that social media?
Kinda. I'm thinking about extending it, but the problem is like I also really like watching car videos lately, you know, like what are the latest supercars? And that's not educational. So if I extend the limit on YouTube, there's no controlling what I'm going to do. Unlike, I bet you with Rescue Time, I could do that. But
yeah, I think that idea though of educational content is really interesting because we have so many different reasons we use social media.
Right.
You know, we use it to chat with people, of course, or to stalk people,
right,
or to attend events. But a lot of people use social media to get their news and to get their information,
which is
dangerous.
A problem for the political process.
Yeah, I would even say dangerous.
Yeah.
And so what I do recommend is that you look at why you're using social media and totally keep using social media for those things that make sense. You know, like
totally.
I do use Facebook to look at cool events in my area.
Yeah,
and
you're good about that. I will say, like, once the spell is broken, for me at least, it really was broken. Like I'll forget to check Facebook until I have a live broadcast in our private mastermind, and then I'll go in and see like 40 attachments. But you kind of become dead to people. Like people don't post on my wall. People don't message me anymore on Facebook, and I miss birthdays, I miss events, I miss all kinds of stuff, and I haven't found a good way to get the benefits without paying the price. And once I stopped checking Facebook, I lost interest. Like I have zero interest in checking Facebook or Instagram, which is impressive because Facebook used to be my go-to problem app.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean? So when you'd have a problem that you wanted
Oh, no, I mean like, your problem app
okay.
as in like...
So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, let's talk about problem apps.
So problem apps is something that we can designate as any application that essentially is making us feel worse in some way. It's it's decreasing our quality of life.
Right.
You know, it's taking up our attention, distracting us, making us feel bad, letting us
avoid the real discomfort.
The real discomfort that's underneath. And you know, it's not our fault. We were given these kind of like distraction tools. But it's really important to take a look at what are your specific problem applications.
Right.
And what's underneath them, you know? So if you are on social media, if you're on Instagram because you're feeling lonely,
right.
Being on Instagram is probably not going to make you feel less lonely. No, it's going to make you feel more.
Yeah.
So one of the things we do in our course is have people think through their problem programs, identify them, look at the feelings behind them, and come up with new habits or new activities that can actually make them feel better or just help them process their feelings.
I love that. And, you know, I also want to add, it's not necessarily just social media. Like we live in Israel. Most people's problem app is Ynet. It's news. Like, I mean, not most. Let's face it. Like, nothing compares to Instagram. But the generation above us, like, I won't name names, but I know a lot of people in their 50s and 60s in Israel who are addicted to news. And part of it is like living in this country. You always want to know what's going on. And
you want to be a part of something bigger.
Also, yeah, but there's also this like existential anxiety that Israelis have of like, you know, what's happening in Gaza right now and what's happening in Syria. And so that's like a real thing. But actually, it just illustrates like the reason that's a problem app is anxiety. right? And so
Right.
deal with the underlying anxiety of living in this country.
Yeah, but with any of these kinds of social applications or
Mhm.
news, a person is really getting two things. They're getting the social influx, and then they're also getting a dopamine hit
Right.
of like something changing,
New
excitement, new
information, bright
information.
lights.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we look at is how can we get those two things elsewhere,
Right.
and there's a million ways.
Totally.
And, yeah.
Totally. So I know we're coming up on time here, Maya. I want to ask you, what's the number one thing you did to feel superhuman today, or since it's early, yesterday?
It is early. I had a beautiful neighborhood walk this morning.
Lovely.
I think that every time I do something that's really body based,
Yeah.
where I basically am turning down my cognitive function,
Mhm.
coming back to my body. Yesterday's yoga class is another great example. Though that does make me feel a bit superhuman in a way.
I love that.
It connects me to something bigger.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Mine is a little less peaceful. Mine's like if I don't get my heart rate up to 175, which is like a hellish experience.
Also, though, if I go on a run,
Yeah.
I mean, like all of us, if we go running or something where we're really sweating,
Totally.
you're gonna feel alive.
Totally.
Let's go hiking this weekend.
I am in Greece this weekend.
Okay, next weekend.
Next weekend. I'm totally keen. Homework. Give our audience some homework that they can do while they wait for next week's episode or for our course to come out.
Homework. So I think that each person's specific digital issues do vary. There are common ones. How I handle my email, how do I handle my passwords, how do I know that everything's backed up. So my homework would be that for the next, ideally, 30 days.
Yeah.
I actually want to challenge your listeners.
Yeah.
That for the next 30 days, you take 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day off of social media or off of some other distraction area, and you spend it organizing your digital life.
Wow. I love that.
Just 10 minutes a day, and you can just go function by function,
I love that. That's a really good segue. We've mentioned in passing a few different times this course that we've created that I kind of twisted your arm to create because the origin story of it is I saw your email inbox and I was like, holy crap, teach me. And that's a big statement because I've taught for many years a course on productivity, which I do a lot of digital automation, digital kind of structuring and stuff like that. But I was like, this is on a different level. So I want to talk for a few minutes about this course and what it entails and what people can learn and why we felt it was so important to spend months of our lives creating it.
I think it's just so relevant right now in this particular moment. We all as a society, we need an instruction manual. We need a kind of guide on how to organize, how to handle the volume of our digital lives. And I think that, the two of us have some of that knowledge.
Yeah. And acquired a lot along the way as well.
Yes, and continue to.
Nirael recently on his latest book, Indistractable, which was really interesting and confirmed a lot of the stuff we teach in the course.
Yeah, there are a lot of amazing people putting their energy and their thought into this space. And I wanted to create something really practical.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people thinking about it. I'm connected to several different communities.
Right.
But I really wanted something that every single person, including my parents, for example.
Totally.
That they can, open up, go through the course, and by the end of it, feel like they have digital peace of mind again.
Yes. Well, practical and also accessible because hiring you as a coach to do this is quite expensive, I imagine, or more expensive than the
course.
Yeah. Well, and your resume justifies it. You've done this for some of the biggest organizations in the world. Though people should feel free to reach out to Maya, of course, about coaching and guidance.
Yeah, especially if you've taken the course. And still have questions, especially around mindfulness.
Right.
I think that's where coaching really can come in.
Yeah.
Beyond just the practical step by step.
Yeah, and I have the same policy as like I'm happy to help people once they've gone through the basics, but it's not worth their money,
time and money.
Yeah, their time and money, your time and money, or your time to re-explain. And I think we've created really an opus of what is like digital declutter, not just digital declutter because it's actually called digital Zen. And it goes into much, much more. Like not just here's how to organize your email inbox and here's how to organize your photos and here's how to finally get your notes under control, but also what are the mindsets, what are the behaviors, what are the best practices, and how do you set up systems that are robust? Because like you said, we're all human. Stuff happens. We get injured. We pull a muscle, and things kind of start to fall apart. So how do you have these systems so that once and for all, it's going to last? Which I think is the big difference. And then folks who check it out on superhumanacademy.com will also get a whole bunch of stuff on how to remain decluttered while working in teams, how to rewrite your scripts around digital addiction and bad habits. So a lot of really, really valuable content. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that if you have any part of you that has a question around this area, if you have any anxiety around it, when I say email, your body tenses up, it's probably a good idea to at least look at some of our resources and materials.
100%.
And we invite you to do that.
Yeah, and the course comes out July 22nd, I want to say. You can check it out by going to superhumanacademy.com/Zen, Zen. And we will make sure, someone on my team, I'm sure, will make sure that works. Superhumanacademy.com/Zen. And of course, if you are a member of Superhuman Squad, which is our all access pass, then you actually have already had access to this for a week or so. So really cool. Consider checking that out. And we definitely appreciate Maya joining in on that huge amount of value. Maya, before I thank you and let you go, I want to ask you, if people take away one big message from this episode and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
I think that there are many things in this world that we do not control. Many, many things that are bigger than us and that we do not control. But this is one area that is very much in our hands.
I love it. And where can people reach out to you, learn more, get in contact with you, besides obviously this course, Digital Zen?
Yeah, definitely through the course.
Okay.
Also on our Facebook group, Digital Zen. You can definitely get in touch with me there. And on email, hellodigitalzen@gmail.com.
Love it. And we'll put all of that in the show notes for folks. Maya, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, super friends, that is all we have for you today, but I hope you guys really enjoyed the show, and I hope you learned a ton of actionable information, tips, advice that will help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or drop us a quick little note on the Twitter machine @GoSuperhuman. Also, if you have any ideas for anyone out there who you would love to see on the show, we always love to hear your recommendations. You can submit on our website, or you can just drop us an email and let us know. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.